Part 34. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 331. Noticing the blue light spots on the sea, Wang Ling quickly dragged the electronic map and pulled it over. Only then did he see that the Allied Navy had already begun to take action. Since the dock of the No. 15 Allied Forces base was just built, the dolphins hidden by the Allied Navy in advance began to attack. After Wang Ling killed them all with V-3 rockets, they still regretted coming here. During this time, they have been saving up strength, trying to launch a thunder offensive. And after building up their strength until now, this group of Allied navies finally couldn't hold back anymore. Last time, dolphins were sent to test the number of submarines in the city's defense line. Now this group of Allied navies has obviously made targeted preparations and expanded them. The lineup can be described as luxurious. On the sea, the combined navies of the two Allied bases have more than 40 destroyers, 6 aircraft carriers, and 2 Aegis cruisers. These are only the troops that can be seen on the sea. It is still unknown how many dolphins are lurking under the sea. If it were in the game, with this kind of lineup, it would be no problem to push through several enemy bases. Seeing this lineup, Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh. In order to deal with us, the Allies are really thinking hard this time. The Kirov airship at the No. 1 Allied Forces base has now left the base and is heading towards the Allied Forces base in full swing. Wang Ling didn't want to miss the first battle scene of this kind of aerial death, but this airship had extremely high armor and health, but the corresponding speed was really annoying. It was obviously in flight, but its speed was no faster than that of infantry. If they were expected to rush to the Allied base, the Allied Navy would have already broken into the city defense lines and started fighting. Thinking of this, Wang Ling couldn't help but shook his head. He had no time to pay attention to the Kirov airship for the time being. He could only concentrate on dealing with the crisis on the city's defense line from the sea. Brother Zhao, General, pay attention, the Allied Navy has been dispatched, in large numbers. After having the direction, Wang Ling hurriedly reported. You see, our reinforcements have also been dispatched. Let's see who is tougher then, General Li Wiki replied in the command post. The Allied forces suffered such a big loss yesterday, and they have learned a lesson from the experience. In the command post, General Li Wiki and his 2 deputies, Zhao Pingwang and Rovsky, will always have someone watching the battlefield and the actions of the Allied Navy. They saw it earlier than Wang Ling, and immediately notified reinforcements. After the last dolphin test, knowing that their troops were exposed, the 2 bases also adopted Wang Ling's suggestion. During this period, they stepped up the construction of some submarines. Now, the 2 coalition bases combined have more than 30 submarines. Submarine, more than 10 giant squids. However, with these navies, it may be difficult to stop the attack of the Allied navies, so reinforcements are still quite necessary. This time the reinforcements came from Coalition Base No. 4. As mentioned before, the lineup of the coalition forces is not arranged strictly according to the serial number. For example, the coalition base No. 4 is far away from the coalition bases No. 1, 2, and 3. It is developed alone in a coastal area behind the battle line. Because of its unique geographical advantage, Allied Force Base No. 4 rarely encountered Allied Army attacks unless the front line collapsed. Therefore, naval construction was developed with peace of mind on this decisive battlefield. Base No. 15 and No. 16 before arriving, there had been many large-scale naval battles with the Allies, and the experience was quite rich. Compared with the Allied spy satellites, the coalition's radar is still very limited. After the spy satellite is completed, all places on the entire map will be instantly detected and displayed on the electronic map without missing a beat. However, the coalition's radar can only be limited to areas that have been manually explored and displayed on electronic maps. It is inevitable that there will be many unexplored areas. Wang Ling had just arrived at this decisive battlefield. Many sea areas had been explored on the sea, and many islands could even be seen. To put it bluntly, this was actually the masterpiece of the number 4 coalition base. This time, coalition base number 4 sent a total of more than 10 submarines, 8 giant squids, and 3 sea scorpion ships to follow. Although the number was not too many, but coupled with the number of navies on the city's defense line, the Allies wanted to break through. But it's very difficult. Of course, after all, the navy of the city defense line had just been established, and Wang Ling was not very familiar with naval warfare, so he was not very confident about this battle. On the way to the reinforcements, he personally led all the V-3 rocket cars and vehicles in the Wolf Group. All anti-aircraft tracked vehicles below the elite level, along with 3 elite Apocalypse tanks, rushed to the edge of the coastline. His abacus is simple to say. Since he is not good at naval warfare and his water power is weak, he can make up for it with land warfare power. The distance between the Allied forces base number 15 and number 16 and base number 4 is relatively not too far away. At the speed of the Navy at base number 4, they gradually arrived at the city defense line after sailing for a while. At this time, the Allied Navy the troops are still far away from here. According to Wang Ling's idea, this blocking battle should mainly consolidate the defense line to block the enemy. However, unexpectedly, after the Navy at the number 4 Allied forces base arrived, they only kept the more than 10 submarines and the 8 giant squids. However, he took 2 sea scorpions and rushed out in a detour. It seemed that he wanted to harass the Allies in advance. Wang Ling looked a little shocked, but he was not familiar with naval warfare after all, so he didn't say much. He just kept paying close attention to the movements of these giant squids and the sea scorpion. The sailing speeds of various types of naval ships are different. For the Allied forces, the speed of destroyers is relatively fast, but the speed of aircraft carriers is much slower. The collective actions of the Allied forces are naturally based on the speed of aircraft carriers, and all are moving slowly. In progress. The giant squids and sea scorpions in base 4 were much faster. The two sides were heading towards each other, and it didn't take long before they met on the sea halfway. The direction of this operation at Allied base number 4 was very tricky. It was taking a detour from the beginning. When the two sides met, these giant squids happened to be on the side of the Allied Navy. After entering their attack range, 8 giant squids he ran directly to the rear of the Allied forces, apparently heading for the aircraft carriers. This giant squid, like dolphins and submarines, belongs to the deep sea force and operates under the sea surface. Even the Allied satellite signals cannot be detected at all in normal times. However, Allied destroyers have specialized means to survey the surrounding deep sea forces. There is even an anti-submarine aircraft docked behind each destroyer, specifically used to deal with deep sea forces such as submarines and giant squid. When the giant squid quietly approached these Allied troops, it was immediately discovered by the more than 10 destroyers at the rear. At that moment, more than 10 anti-submarine aircraft took action together to bomb the giant squid. At this time, the number 4 coalition base was more experienced. It had followed 3 sea scorpions in advance. As soon as these anti-submarine aircraft were discovered within the air defense range, they immediately started bombarding them. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 332. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. The Sea Scorpion's attack method is actually exactly the same as that of an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle on land. It fires briquette-like shells, which can be used for both air defense and ground attack. They all cause splash damage and can cause flakes in a small area of bombing. In comparison, the Sea Scorpion's air defense capability is even higher than that of an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. Although its single-shot damage to the Air Force is not as high as that of the Allied Aegis cruiser, it is not low, and its rate of fire is very high. Fast, air defense efficiency is extremely high. The 3 Sea Scorpions, facing the anti-submarine aircraft on more than a dozen Allied destroyers, were merciless in their artillery fire. Under the continuous fire of artillery shells, those anti-submarine aircraft fell one after another. In the end, only 4 of them had low health. One of the anti-submarine aircraft flew over the giant squid despite the shelling of the Sea Scorpion, and dropped a large number of torpedoes. This kind of anti-submarine aircraft can do a lot of damage to deep-sea troops. An anti-submarine aircraft can attack all the torpedoes in one round and kill most of the health of a giant squid in one go, leaving it severely injured and left with no health in an instant. The cooperation of these 4 anti-submarine aircraft was not so tacit. 3 of them hit different giant squids, seriously injuring them. The other one was slightly behind and hit one of the giant squids with residual health. Go up and kill him on the spot. More than a dozen anti-submarine aircraft, under the attack of the Sea Scorpion, only managed to kill one giant squid. This achievement simply discredited the Allied Navy. The other destroyers stopped moving on the spot and collectively began to target these giant squids. Nearly 30 anti-submarine aircraft are dispatched now. However, taking advantage of the last round of attack, those giant squids had already approached the Allied forces. Knowing the danger, the 4 giant squids at the front simply changed their targets and attacked the destroyers nearby. How do giant squid attack surface ships? This is quite an exaggeration. I saw the 4 giant squids plunge directly into the deep sea, and then wave all their arms and legs. One squid aimed at a destroyer, entangled it completely from the sea surface, and then used its the terrifying force shakes the sea surface vigorously. Every time it shakes, it will slam the destroyer hard into the sea surface, causing it to slowly reduce its health. The entangled destroyer, however, could not get out of the trap and could only be controlled in such a miserable way, as if a ground tank had been drilled into a terrorist robot. But the difference is that the ground tank has entered the terrorist robot, and at least it still has the ability to move, but the destroyer controlled by the giant squid is firmly locked and cannot go anywhere. During this period, you can fire, but you can only fire directly forward. It can be said that once this destroyer is controlled by the giant squid, it will basically be doomed. From here, you can also see why this giant squid is called giant. It is simply exaggerated. During the game, I didn't have much feeling when I saw this giant squid, but Wang Ling was in the red alert world and watched the giant squid up close, but I was frightened by its size and felt a little numb. Speaking of this giant squid, I have to thank Yuri. This kind of giant squid was first captured and trained by Yuri's psychic troops. In the end, it even reached the level of batch domestication, using some simple mind control devices to issue instructions. Although it is more troublesome to attack ships and cannot sink them quickly, in fact, the Allied ships are really tired of this giant squid and want to get rid of it as soon as possible. The 4 giant squids succeeded, and each one controlled a destroyer. The other 3 were not to be outdone. When the group of anti-submarine aircraft were still approaching, they had already taken the lead and broke into the rear of the Allied ship group. 2 entangled them. After boarding the Aegis cruiser, the last one ferociously boarded the aircraft carrier, stretched out all its arms and legs, wrapped up and shook the Allied forces' big killer weapon on the sea. Regardless of whether they had residual health or full health, all 7 giant squids found their targets and successfully entangled the Allied ships. Those anti-submarine planes flew over here, and they were in trouble for a while. If we continue to drop a large number of torpedoes to attack, we will have to sink the giant squid and our own ships together. The Allies had no guts to do such a thing. In this situation, all anti-submarine aircraft gave up their attack and flew to their respective destroyers. But boom, 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 boom. The 3 Sea Scorpions docked in the distance took aim at this opportunity, opened up their firepower, and bombarded the anti-submarine aircraft to their heart's content. Anti-submarine aircraft were continuously shot down. Nearly 30 were dispatched, but in the end, less than 20 successfully landed back on the destroyer. However, precisely because of the Sea Scorpion's crazy firing, the destroyers that were unable to attack the giant squid finally aimed at the 3 Sea Scorpions. Nearly 30 destroyers all changed their targets and quickly approached the Sea Scorpion. All the destroyers opened fire in sequence, sinking one almost in the blink of an eye. During this period, the Sea Scorpion naturally had a counterattack, but this kind of ship has extremely strong air defense capabilities and is very lethal to infantry. However, it is somewhat powerless against tanks and destroyers with heavy armor, and cannot attack them at all. And this destroyer is equivalent to a tank on the sea. It is extremely durable. The destructive power of its bombardment is even higher than that of ordinary tanks. It is also dispatched in groups. Under this situation, the Sea Scorpion is in such a battle formation. Without any ability to resist, the second ship was also sunk. Zhizhizzy. As for the third ship, before the destroyer could open fire, a large number of sound waves visible to the naked eye collided under the sea, sinking it in an instant. The source of this sound wave is naturally the Allied dolphins. This time the Allied forces launched an attack. These were the only troops on the sea, but there were also many dolphins under the sea. However, these dolphins were faster than destroyers. They kept clearing the way ahead and perfectly avoided the giant squid. When the Navy focused its fire on the Sea Scorpion, the dolphins still obeyed the order, turned around and started to attack. Boom! 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 3 Sea Scorpions were sunk, but the 7 giant squids were still shaking the 7 Allied warships like crazy. It felt like 7 shrews beating their husbands desperately. It was terrifying. It just happens to be a little funny. Looking at the health bars of those ships, they all still have a lot of blood, and they can't be sunk at all for a while. However, the remaining Allied navies still had missions to do, so they simply abandoned these ships and giant squids, turned their ships around collectively, and continued to advance towards the Allied city defense line. This is a slippery move. On the city coastline, Wang Ling could be said to have watched the whole naval battle just now, and couldn't help but click his tongue. I rarely encounter naval battles in games, but I didn't expect naval battles to be so intense. The giant squid combined with the Sea Scorpion is quite annoying. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 333. Boom. 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 On the sea, 7 huge giant squids are still shaking like crazy, Allied warships entangled with each other. Every time they shake, there is a sense of déjà vu making waves. The 7 Allied warships can only bear this. There is no way out. But the other Allied ships have completely given up on them and drifted away. Now they are completely out of their observation range and rushing towards the Allied city defense line. After watching the whole naval battle, everyone in the city, whether it was Wang Ling, Li Wiki, General Luo Er, or several other deputies, felt like they had been taught something. After all, they rarely come into contact with naval battles and are relatively unfamiliar with it. However, now is not the time to relax. After all, there are only a few Allied ships trapped by the giant squid. Other ships, as well as dolphins lurking under the ground, are now rapidly approaching the city's defense line. Because they were unfamiliar with naval battles, Li Wiki and General Luo Er were not very sure that they could win this naval battle. At this time, they completely put aside their arrogance as commanders and asked the commander of the No. 4 coalition base for advice on naval battles. Details, and discussed the next naval battle strategy together. During this process, Wang Ling was not idle, and temporarily dispatched some elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicles from the Wolf Group. After all, he also lacked experience in naval warfare. At the beginning, Wang Ling thought it was relatively simple. He only considered the Allied aircraft carriers and pulled out a bunch of ungraded anti-aircraft crawler vehicles to practice and improve his level. But after seeing the scene of the naval battle just now, he did not dare to be careless. The anti-submarine aircraft on the Allied destroyers posed a great threat to the Allied naval forces. Stronger air defense forces had to be dispatched to deal with it, otherwise this crisis was hard to get through. After everything is ready, wait for the Allied naval forces to arrive and start a big battle. Under the pressure of war, time seemed to pass very slowly, almost by the second, which was somewhat torturous. But at the same time, it seemed to go by very quickly. After all, not many normal people like war. The peace before the war always seems so luxurious. I don't know how long it took, but it felt like the Allied naval forces were approaching the city's defense line in the blink of an eye. It is still unclear how many dolphins there are under the sea and where they are hiding, but the destroyers on the sea are about to enter the range of the V-3 rocket after sailing for this period of time. The V-3 rocket car is ready to launch. At this time, Wang Ling was highly focused, estimating the time and range at any time. When the vanguard of the Allied destroyer arrived at a certain location, Wang Ling suddenly an attack order was given. The 10 V-3 rocket cars had long been accustomed to Wang Ling's style of play and had been prepared for it. When the order came, they all raised their V-3 rockets without hesitation. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! With the sound of bursts of flames passing through the wire, 10 huge V-3 rockets immediately took off. After all, these destroyers belong to the high armor category and are more resistant to beating than most tanks on the ground. Wang Ling is not confident that 2 or 3 V-3 rockets can kill one. He only marked 2 bombing areas in advance. There are 5 V-3 rockets taking care of each area. The destroyer's armor must not be able to withstand this kind of bombing. Boom! Boom boom boom! Wow! Sure enough, Wang Ling's assumption was not wrong. Under his prediction, 5 of those V-3 rockets accurately landed on the first destroyer. After eating these 5 V-3 rockets in one go, the destroyer was immediately emptied of life and sank directly to the bottom of the sea. However, Wang Ling is also a human being after all, not a machine or a program, and his prediction cannot be 100% accurate. 5 V-3 rockets hit one destroyer, but the other 5 missed and only hit the second ship near the destroyer. Affected by the violent explosion, the destroyer's health bar also dropped, but it was only reduced by half, far from being sunk. Damn it, it's off track. Wang Ling looked a little annoyed, but there was nothing he could do about it. To be honest, his style of play can still be used, thanks to the blessing of Allied Forces Base No. 4, which used giant squids to harass in advance. Now the Allied Aegis cruisers are still far away in the sea, being attacked by shrews. The same giant squid is swaying crazily. If there are those 2 Aegis cruisers in the fleet, at least half of these 10 V-3 rockets will be intercepted, and the remaining rockets will not be able to kill even a destroyer. Well done. However, Wang Ling was annoyed, but some people applauded him. For example, the commander of the coalition forces at Base No. 4 saw the scene just now from the electronic map and couldn't help but praise, "Old Li and Lao Luo, we have yours, these V-3 the rockets played so well." General Luo was speechless for a moment. And General Li Wiki simply admitted it, "This is not our fault, it is our wolf group leader Wang Ling, a very magical person." Haha, Wang Ling? He is a talent. I must meet him when I have the opportunity in the future. Okay, don't talk so much now, the war is about to begin. General Luo finally couldn't help but interrupt. While they were talking, a large number of dolphins in the waters ahead of the destroyer fleet had been detected by the coalition submarine and exposed to radar signals. The 2 sides have been fighting to the death for a long time. When the deep sea troops meet, there is only one word, you. Boom boom boom. Zhiz hizzy. At that moment, more than 10 ships lined up at the front fired huge torpedoes. Every time they bombed the dolphins, a huge spray would explode, which was really beautiful. Not to be outdone, the dolphins emitted harsh sound waves one after another, which were displayed on the electronic map as blue bands visible to the naked eye. Don't underestimate this kind of sonic attack. Wang Ling returned to the real world these days. When he was bored, he also checked the naval information of this game, and the one he paid special attention to was the dolphin. In the eyes of some combat-oriented red alert experts, dolphins are the most terrifying unit of the Allied Navy, because this sonic attack is a penetrating attack method. What is penetration type? It passes directly through the body, and the longer the penetration distance, the greater the lethality. For example, if a large tree with a diameter of 1 meter and a height of 10 meters is passed through, the damage will be only 1 meter in diameter. However, if it is split from top to bottom by thunder, it will be a full damage. The length of the injury was 10 meters, and the comparison of its lethality can be imagined. I even heard of a master's magical operation. A dolphin exploded a dock and fully penetrated the attack. It only required 4 sound wave attacks to do it. Fortunately, the Allies were not those experts and did not really explore the potential of the dolphins. The method of allowing the dolphins to directly hit the target was only the lowest attack power of the dolphins. Otherwise, the city's defense line would have been attacked just after the dock was built. Exploded, unable to build its own naval force. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 334. Zhiz-hizzy. Zhiz-hizzy. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. The naval battle is still going on. The potential of those Allied dolphins has not been discovered by the Allies at all. Every sound wave launched directly hits the target submarine. No penetrating attack is launched, and the attack power is reduced to the minimum. A dozen dolphins collectively target a submarine, and it takes several rounds of attacks to sink it. However, the Allied submarines do not have so many requirements. Every large torpedo has huge destructive power. The Allied dolphins are only fleshy and have basically no armor. It is difficult to withstand such attacks. Basically, several large torpedoes are fired. You can kill a dolphin with just one class. In the rapid collision between the two sides, the advantages of strength and weakness were immediately highlighted. During the battle between the Vanguard deep-sea forces, the coalition forces took advantage. From time to time during the battle, the screams of dolphins dying could be heard, and occasionally the sound of water flowing when the submarine completely sank. But relatively speaking, the screams where the frequency was much higher. After a short period of fierce fighting, all the leading dolphins of the Allied forces were killed. However, in this attack, the number of dolphins dispatched by the Allied forces was very large. The leading troops were killed in the battle, but the dolphins in the rear also took the opportunity to rush forward in a semi-surrounding formation and began to besiege the coalition submarines. Looking at their total number, I am afraid that there are no less than 50. In addition to the more than 10 killed in the previous battle, the Allies dispatched more than 60 dolphins in this attack. It's really crazy. Of course, the coalition submarines were not to be outdone. They attracted the attention of several dolphins and fought head-on with them. The sound of torpedo explosions and the screams of dolphins echoed everywhere on the sea. They were intertwined and seemed to form a unique symphony of death on the battlefield. While these two types of arms were fighting, the other naval arms were not idle either. The coalition's giant squids also began to dispatch and sneak attacks on the dolphins. The squid fights with the dolphins in this red alert world. Instead of using arms and legs to forcibly tie them up like in reality, it's about smashing them more violently than shaking the ship. That's right, when a giant squid attacks a dolphin, it doesn't use its arms and legs. Instead, it gets close and hits it hard with its huge head. Wang Ling had seen this violent scene before using an electronic map when he was migrating, but when he saw it with his own eyes today, he couldn't help but be shocked. It was too violent. Of course, when dolphins faced giant squids, they would not just let them smash them. During this period, many dolphins targeted these giant squids and launched sharp sound wave attacks. Giant squids are not like submarines. They have thick armor. Like dolphins, they are made of flesh and blood. Their vitality is relatively fragile. The sonic attacks of dolphins are very effective on them. With a series of sonic attacks, the giant squids are instantly destroyed. 3 of them died in a short time. During this period, the submarine was also launching torpedoes unceremoniously, and the dolphin army also suffered casualties all the time. And just as these deep-sea units were engaged in a fierce battle, the destroyers that were farther back finally rushed over. Facing the coalition navy in the deep sea, nearly 40 anti-submarine aircraft were dispatched collectively and arranged in the sky. It was a spectacular sight. Fight me, there won't be a single one left. But Wang Ling had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. As soon as the anti-submarine planes were dispatched, all the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles on the coastline opened fire. Even Wang Ling transformed into a 5-star anti-aircraft infantry in advance and opened fire along with them. After all, the development of the Navy on the urban defense line was relatively late. Not even a Sea Scorpion has been built yet. As for the air defense power, we can only count on the ground army. As for the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles of Wang Ling and the Wolf Group, their anti-aircraft firepower was indeed unparalleled. They launched a massive amount of anti-aircraft shells in an instant. Large areas of anti-submarine aircraft were shot down and fell into the sea, as if a meteor shower had fallen from the sky. Very lively. However, there were too many of these anti-submarine aircraft, nearly 40 in total, and they were too close to the battle line. Even if Wang Ling and the anti-aircraft crawlers used all their firepower, they could not stop them all. There were still nearly 20 anti-submarine aircraft flew above the naval battle area and collectively dropped a large number of torpedoes. Although the power of a single shot of these torpedoes is far less than that of torpedoes launched by submarines, they are huge in number after all. All the torpedoes dropped by 3 anti-submarine aircraft are enough to blow up a submarine. As a result, under this round of torpedo bombing, 3 giant squids and 4 submarines were destroyed by the coalition forces in an instant, and 2 other submarines were damaged to varying degrees. This is still nearly half of the number intercepted by the Wolf Group. If no air defense force intervenes, the losses will probably be even more serious. I've rebelled against you. Go ahead and fight me. Wang Ling gritted his teeth and urged his troops to increase their firepower output. About half of those large groups of anti-submarine aircraft were shot down during the attack. Naturally, it was not easy when they returned. They were shot down continuously. In the end, there were less than 5 anti-submarine aircraft, and they still returned to the destroyer at the cost of residual health. Although a large number of anti-submarine aircraft were shot down, the anti-submarine aircraft on the destroyer were of little value at all. The loss was not painful for the destroyer. After a while, another one would be produced on its own to continue bombarding underwater targets. However, this also requires a process. During this process, the destroyer army cannot target the deep-sea troops. But there are always exceptions. The 2 submarines that were bombed by anti-submarine aircraft before floated to the surface of the sea for some reason. As a result, they were directly targeted by a large number of destroyers. A large number of artillery shells were directly bombarded. Several submarines were bombed by anti-submarine aircraft. The 2 submarines were sunk in just one breath. Boom boom boom. Zhiz. Under the sea, the fierce naval battle continued, and on the sea, anti-submarine aircraft could not be produced for a while. During this time, the destroyers had no other means of dealing with the deep-sea forces. Seeing this situation, Wang Ling simply transformed into a king-level magnetic blast infantry, launching a powerful electromagnetic current from the coastline to deal with the Allied Navy in a land battle. In reality, seawater is a conductor, but in this red alert world, whether it is a magnetic storm coil or a magnetic blast infantry, the electromagnetic current cannot use seawater to conduct electricity. Wang Ling's attack method can only be the same as before, with the help of his soldiers. The king-level power connection ability has completely enveloped some destroyers. The sea area is very vast, and the arrangement of these destroyers is not very concentrated. As a result, Wang Ling's electromagnetic attack only shocked about 15 or 16 destroyers. The power of the King of Soldiers' magnetic blast infantry is not weak. The health bars on the heads of these destroyers shrouded in electromagnetic waves are also rapidly shrinking, and it seems that they cannot last long at all. However, this attack also attracted the attention of this group of destroyers. Since they were temporarily unable to attack the deep-sea troops, they simply moved their targets to the coast, turned the ships collectively, and sailed towards Wanling. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 335. Retreat, quickly. Observing the movements of the Allied destroyer army, Wang Ling was a little anxious and shouted quickly. The destroyer's firepower was so fierce that the anti-aircraft crawlers on the coast might not be able to withstand a few shots and would be blown up. Wang Ling didn't want to see his men die in a place like this. After receiving the order, the nearby anti-aircraft crawler vehicles simply retreated a certain distance, hiding out of reach of the destroyer army, and continued to wait for hunting anti-submarine aircraft. However, the 3 elite Apocalypse tanks remained. Although destroyers are equivalent to tanks on the sea, and their attack power is higher than most tanks on the ground, this does not include the Apocalypse tank. With the firepower of the elite Apocalypse tank, the destroyer probably won't be in trouble either. During this period, Wang Ling also fought and retreated. Although his physical fitness has become extremely abnormal after intermediate strengthening and several rounds of minor strengthening during unit upgrades, he still cannot resist the bombardment of destroyers. Besides, there was nothing to irritate him, so he didn't have to use his body to resist the bombardment of the light tank like last time. The electromagnetic attack of the King of Soldiers class has a paralysis function. All destroyers shrouded in electromagnetism not only have their health bars rapidly reduced, but also their sailing speed has been greatly slowed down. However, the other destroyers took the opportunity to go around and soon arrived near the coastline. Rumble! Rumble! At this time, the 3 elite Apocalypse tanks that had been waiting for a long time finally had the opportunity to open fire. The 3 tanks fired a salvo, and 6 explosive shells were focused on a destroyer. The destroyer could not resist and was bombarded almost instantly. Shen. After sinking one ship, the 3 Apocalypse immediately changed their targets and bombarded them one after another. While the destroyer army came to a halt, 3 ships in a row were sunk. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Not only that, this is the city's defense line. There are many high-rise buildings near the coastline, and many mobilization troops are stationed inside. There happen to be 2 buildings nearby the coastline where the destroyer is approaching. When the destroyer approaches, they will all a fire was started. There were at least 20 conscripts in the 2 buildings, and they fired at a destroyer together. They also sank a destroyer while it was docking. However, it was limited to this one. The destroyers immediately started to counterattack after stopping. Some of them bombarded one of the Apocalypse tanks, and the others aimed at the 2 high-rise buildings that fired. These high-rise buildings were all civilian buildings built during peacetime. They could only be temporarily garrisoned by soldiers and were not very resistant to beatings. As a result, the group of destroyers concentrated their fire and blew up both buildings in 2 or 3 blows. The mobilization soldiers stationed among them did not receive any harm. They were exposed one after another, and then fled immediately, wanting to continue to get into other buildings and repeat the previous tactics. However, These destroyers are too close, and their lethality to infantry is also terrifying. With one shot, a large number of soldiers will be seriously injured. Under the attack of the destroyer group, these more than 20 infantrymen were all wiped out before they could run far. Boom, boom, boom. Boom boom boom. Relatively speaking, the Apocalypse tanks were more resistant to beatings. When the group of conscripts were killed, the 3 Apocalypse tanks were still confronting these destroyers, and in the blink of an eye, 2 more destroyers were sunk. However, the Apocalypse tank that was attacked was also beaten to a residual health, and the other destroyers vacated the space, turned their hulls together, and bombarded the Apocalypse tank. Under a concentrated fire, the remaining HP tank, the Apocalypse tank, was blown up instantly. Stop fighting and come back. Watching this scene helplessly, Wang Ling became anxious. That was an elite-level Apocalypse tank. There were not many of them in the entire Wolf group. It was too laborious to train one. Wang Ling felt heartbroken when one of them was destroyed. The remaining 2 elite Apocalypse tanks were ordered to stop attacking immediately, turned around and began to retreat. However, during this process, the destroyers were still shelling. Just by breaking out of the range of their shelling, another elite Apocalypse was hit. It became residual blood. The attack power of the destroyer army's concentrated fire is really scary. Your grandma's. Wang Ling gritted his teeth and widened his eyes. He continued to bombard the destroyer that had lost half of its health as if to vent his anger, causing it to lose blood in a large area. The queen of the 10-star soldiers, the attack range of the magnetic blast infantry was much larger, far above those destroyers. As a result, the destroyers were shocked by the electric shock, but they were unable to fight back at all, and they were shaking anxiously. Every inch is stronger. However, these destroyers were single and could not hit Wang Ling, so they simply changed their targets, moved collectively and began to bombard an anti-aircraft gun in base number 16. And coincidentally, their group of destroyers also broke into the range of a magnetic storm coil, and the magnetic storm coil immediately began to fight back, electrocuting one of the destroyers that had been beaten to a pulp by Wang Ling, and fired 2 shots in succession. After sinking it, he turned to attack another one. However, the firepower of this group of destroyers was really terrifying. During this period, they concentrated fire to blow up the anti-aircraft gun, and then began to attack the magnetic storm coil, sinking another destroyer at the cost of it. Blast! In the distance, Wang Ling's electromagnetic attack continued. After such a long period of electric shock, the group of destroyers that he had been targeting were finally drained of their health. More than 10 destroyers all sank to the bottom of the sea. This efficiency is simply higher than the previous types of arms combined. Well done. In the number 4 coalition base, the commander couldn't help but applaud when he saw this scene. He even zoomed in on the video, looked at Wang Ling, studied it for a moment, and exclaimed, "Is this person Wang Ling? What a real person! Fantastic person!" Compared to the exclamation of Commander Number 4, General Li Wiki and General Luo Er were already accustomed to Wang Ling's abnormality. When they heard his words, they just shrugged their shoulders and did not express their stance. On the city defense line, Wang Ling couldn't hear Commander No 4's praise. He was not satisfied with sinking more than 10 destroyers. He immediately changed his target and instantly covered the remaining dozen destroyers, vowing to attack them. The posture of sinking the entire destroyer army. In this process, the anti-submarine aircraft on the destroyer ships were finally produced again, and then left the destroyers without hesitation, flew in groups, and began the next round of bombing against the coalition's deep-sea forces. Kill me down. However, not far from the coastline, the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles had been waiting for a long time. They immediately began a violent bombardment. These newly produced anti-submarine aircraft were immediately shot down in pieces. If this posture is followed, even if the anti-submarine aircraft army can break through the attack of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, it will not be able to destroy many deep-sea troops of the coalition. However, this is not the only navy dispatched by the Allied forces. Just as the naval battle was in full swing, a large number of fighter jets suddenly flew from the distance and headed straight for the Allied forces dock. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 336. This. Seeing these flying fighter jets, Wang Ling was a little confused for a moment, and he didn't expect their origin. But after thinking for a moment, I thought of a major branch of the Allied Navy aircraft carrier. Yes, the Allied forces came in force this time, but 6 aircraft carriers came, one of them was dragged back by the giant squid on the way, and now there are 5 more aircraft carriers. Wang Ling hurriedly pulled the electronic video to check it subconsciously. Sure enough, 5 aircraft carriers were lined up in the sea far away from the coastline. Similar to aircraft carriers in reality, the combat effectiveness of aircraft carriers in this red alert world is also reflected in those carrier-based fighter jets. However, in reality, an aircraft carrier has a large number of carrier-based fighter jets, and there will also be other secondary guns to cooperate with it. However, in this red alert game, the combat effectiveness of the aircraft carrier has been weakened too much. Not only is the secondary battery gun missing, but the carrier-based fighter jets are also missing. The number is also greatly limited. There are only 3 carrier-based fighter jets on an aircraft carrier, which greatly limits its combat effectiveness. Of course, quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. If the number is large, it will be different. There are 5 aircraft carriers, and the total number of carrier-based fighter jets has reached 15. This is not a small number. As luck would have it, when these carrier-based fighter jets came over, the Wolf Group's air defense brigade and vehicles were concentrating on bombarding the remaining anti-submarine aircraft, and had no extra energy to pay attention to these carrier-based fighter jets. As a result, the only ones who could resist were the anti-aircraft guns built on the seaside in base number 16. The power of these anti-aircraft shells is not small, and the rate of fire is not slow, but the number is too small, and they cannot intercept many at a time. As a result, after intercepting and bombarding, only 5 were shot down, but the remaining 9 carrier-based fighter jets have already been intercepted. They flew above the dock of base number 15 and collectively dropped a meteor shower of missiles. Swish swish swish. Boom. These missiles are just like the torpedoes of anti-submarine aircraft. The power of a single shot is not very great, but there are a lot of them. The destructive power of the concentrated missiles is also very terrifying. The dock could not hold on for long before it was completely exploded. After fighting for so long, the main building of the coalition was finally blown up. However, this is not enough. There are 2 shipyards on the city's defense line, and there are 2 major coalition bases in the city. The damage caused by the Allied forces' massive expenditure of troops actually has no overall impact on the city's defense line. Not too big. But even so, Wang Ling was a little angry. At this time, 3 or 4 Allied anti-submarine aircraft broke through the bombardment area of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, concentrated their firepower and dropped a large number of torpedoes, killing all the remaining giant squid that were still in the fierce battle under the sea. After the torpedo projection was completed, these anti-submarine aircraft returned immediately, but on the way back, they were blocked by the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, and they were all destroyed halfway. After clearing this batch of anti-submarine aircraft, the Wolf Group anti-aircraft crawlers finally freed up their energy and began to bombard the carrier-based fighter jets on their way back. Boom. Boom boom boom. This group of carrier-based fighter jets originally had a large number, 15 in total, but 6 of them were shot down during the attack. On the way back, they were successively bombarded by the anti-aircraft guns of Base 16 and the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft crawlers. Those who failed to break through were all shot down, and the crashing rumbles were heard all at once. In this game, carrier-based fighter jets can be said to be very cheap, or even costless at all. As long as the aircraft carrier is still there, carrier-based fighter jets will be continuously produced, and each ship can maintain the total number at 3. However, like the destroyer's anti-submarine aircraft, it will take some time for this carrier-based fighter to appear again, but it is relatively shorter than the anti-submarine aircraft. Damn, I'm giving you shame. Without those shadowy planes in the sky, Wang Ling finally concentrated all his energy, even with some anger, and violently bombarded the remaining destroyers. The anti-submarine aircraft of this group of destroyers are dispatched together with the carrier-based fighter jets of the aircraft carrier. It is really troublesome and difficult to deal with. Now of course, we must take advantage of the disappearance of the opponent's various types of fighter jets to quickly sink these destroyers. And these remaining destroyers are a bit frustrated to say the least. With their powerful firepower, even if a large number of tanks are dispatched on land, they can fight head-on with them, and their chances of winning will even be greater. However, they happen to catch up with a player like Wang Ling. In this red alert world, they were just like cheating. They were hiding on the far coast and playing video games. However, they still couldn't kill Wang Ling, so they had to. How can you not feel aggrieved by waiting for death so passively? However, after the HP of these destroyers was reduced by more than half, this group of impatient destroyers were unwilling to give in. They actually turned around collectively and sailed towards the dock of the Allied Forces Base number 16. It seemed that they wanted to kill this ship at any cost. The shipyard. However, being shrouded by Wang Ling's electric arc, the speed of this group of destroyers was also greatly affected, and they were unable to sail quickly. During this period, they were even losing blood. Moreover, the battle under the sea has so far included 6 or 7 submarines. With the help of the original cover of the giant squid, the battle has ended and the combat power has been released. Observing the approach of the destroyers, these 6 or 7 submarines immediately gave up the idea of supporting other submarines and began to launch torpedoes at these destroyers with half health or even some remaining health. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Boom. Wow. The attack power of submarines is very strong. 6 or 7 submarines concentrated their fire and fired torpedoes, and concentrated their bombardment on a destroyer. The power of the explosion at that moment caused a huge wave on the sea. As for the destroyer that was attacked, it was already at half or even residual health. How could it withstand such a bombardment? It can only be drained of blood in an instant, and as a large amount of sea water is poured in, the ship sinks quickly. At this time, the remaining destroyers also knew that there was a submarine attacking, but the regrettable thing was that their anti-submarine aircraft were still recovering and had no ability to attack deep-sea troops. They could only force a breakout and attack the dock. And this forceful attack was not without effect. It lasted for a while, and at the cost of sinking another destroyer, they finally escaped from Wang Ling's clutches. However, at this time, the remaining destroyers were all at a loss of health. After the 6 or 7 submarines noticed it, they divided their firepower into 2 places in a tacit understanding, and bombarded 1 destroyer respectively. With the remaining HP of these destroyers, they were unable to resist. If they were bombarded, there would only be a shipwreck. Despite the speed of the shipwreck, the remaining 6 destroyers finally passed through numerous obstacles and sailed under the coalition dock. They hurriedly launched artillery bombardments, hitting as many as they could. As a major naval construction plant, the shipyard is not easy to fight. 6 destroyers with residual health were bombarded one after another. In the end, they were all sunk by the submarines chasing behind them before even half of their health could be destroyed. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 337. By now, all the Allied destroyers have finally fallen into the water. Without the threat of these destroyers, the Allied forces' offensive pressure in this naval battle suddenly dropped sharply. The only remaining Allied navies left were the Dolphins still in the midst of a fierce battle and the aircraft carriers hiding in the distance. While the city's defense line was fully annihilating the destroyers, the carrier-based fighter jets on these 5 aircraft carriers finally successfully reproduced themselves. At that moment, the 15 carrier-based fighter jets were dispatched again, arrayed in the sky, and rushed towards the 16th in a menacing manner. The dock of the coalition base was swept away. However, the last time these carrier-based fighter jets succeeded in blowing up the dock of base number 15, it was the anti-submarine aircraft on the destroyer that dragged the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. Now that there is no cover, how can it be so smooth? What's more, the threat of destroyers is no longer along the coastline. The Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, plus Wang Ling, have now all moved to the coastline, closer to the naval battlefield, and the air defense area is also larger. As soon as the 15 carrier-based combat aircraft flew within its range, the numerous anti-aircraft tracked vehicles of the Wolf Group opened fire together. Even Wang Ling transformed into a 5-star anti-aircraft infantry again and followed along with the artillery fire. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom boom boom. After all, these carrier-based fighter jets are cheap goods that rely on aircraft carriers and can be continuously reproduced. They are much more fragile than the Allied invader fighter jets. As a result, these carrier-based fighter jets failed to get close to the dock and were bombarded by numerous bombardments. Down, falling one after another. The second round of carrier-based fighter jets was also completely wiped out. The 5 aircraft carriers were not discouraged and hid far away, continuing to wait for the new round of carrier-based fighter jets. Boom boom boom. Zhiz. Under the sea, the deep-sea forces of both sides were still engaged in a fierce battle. After fighting for so long, the scale of the battle had shrunk a lot. All the giant squids were wiped out, and dolphins and submarines were also heavily damaged. However, after all, the Allies failed to use the magical effects of dolphins. Each dolphin can only be used as an ordinary unit to fight. Up to now, the Allied forces have an absolute advantage as a whole, and the number of remaining dolphins is significantly less than that of submarines. It is estimated that the winner will be determined soon. After taking one look here, Wang Ling stopped paying attention and instead focused on the 5 aircraft carriers. This aircraft carrier is also insignificant enough, hiding far away to place carrier-based fighter jets. At this distance, even the range of Wang Lingbing's King-level magnetic blast infantry cannot reach it at all. However, just because Wang Ling can't touch him doesn't mean that other types of soldiers can't either. V3 rocket car, get ready. Yes, at this time, Wang Ling immediately thought of the V3 rocket car. After sinking a destroyer earlier, these V3 rocket cars all withdrew to the rear. Wang Ling had been busy fighting and had no time to predict and direct. But now, Wang Ling no longer needs to fight in person, so he has enough energy to take command. The range of this V3 rocket can be regarded as the longest among land combat tanks. It is simply not appropriate to use it at this time. After receiving the order, all 10 V3 rocket cars rushed to the coastline and raised the huge rocket high. Look for the aircraft carrier on the far right, hit it and sink it. Whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Following Wang Ling's order, 10 huge V3 rockets were launched at once, carrying huge destructive power, drawing 10 standard and towering parabolas in the air, and accurately bombarded an aircraft carrier. Boom. Boom boom boom. Wow! Naval arms such as aircraft carriers can be regarded as naval weapons with ultra-high armor and ultra-high health. It will take a while to sink them with a single V3 rocket. But there are now 10 V3 rockets. the combined destructive power cannot even be withstood by the aircraft carrier. As 10 rounds of V-3 rockets are fired, the bombed aircraft carrier has no ability to resist at all. In the blink of an eye, he was drained of blood and gradually sank underwater. After killing such an aircraft carrier, one of the Wolf Group's V-3 rocket cars was finally upgraded to the 1-star veteran level. It seemed that they had gained a lot of experience in this battle. However, Wang Ling didn't pay much attention to this. He didn't expect to be able to pull these V-3 rocket cars out to conquer the city. After all, this thing is too restrictive. If you use a V-3 rocket car to attack a city, you have to send a large number of troops to protect it. Otherwise, it will easily be wiped out by 1 or 2 enemy tanks, which is really not worth the gain. After a casual glance, Wang Ling didn't think much about it. When these V-3 rocket cars were reloading, he had already locked onto the second aircraft carrier. According to the current progress, if this group of V-3 rocket cars launches another 4-wheel salvo, the remaining 4 aircraft carriers should all sink to the bottom. Soon after, all the V-3 rocket cars were loaded, and Wang Ling raised his hand again, aim at the aircraft carrier on the far right and be ready to wait. Just when he was about to lower his hand and give the order to launch, he was suddenly interrupted. Because, he temporarily observed from the electronic map that not far from the 4 aircraft carriers, there were several red light spots approaching quickly. When he looked closer, he saw that they were giant squids at the number 4 Allied forces base. These giant squids were dispatched in advance before the naval battle. With the cover of the Sea Scorpion, they held back 7 Allied ships, including an aircraft carrier. But now, these giant squids have appeared here. It must have been during the naval battle that these giant squids had brought down their respective ships and came to rescue them. Sure enough, Wang Ling dragged the electronic map to check and found that the place where the 7 giant squids had shaken the Allied warships had long since disappeared. On the contrary, several giant squids were on their way quickly on the way. As if they were in a hurry, these giant squids did not cooperate with their actions, and were divided into several stages. The ones at the front were 2 full-blooded squids, and behind them were 2 squids that had been seriously injured by anti-submarine aircraft before, but had returned to half health during this period. These 4 were entangled with destroyers before. At the rear are the 2 giant squids that had previously targeted the Aegis cruiser, and at the very back was the squid that had boarded the aircraft carrier, separated by some distance. After all, the ships they targeted had different armor and health, and they sank at different times, so they didn't gather together to act together. The 2 giant squids rushing at the front naturally discovered the aircraft carriers immediately, and immediately had a target. They quickly swam over, stretched out 8 huge arms and legs, wrapped around them tightly, and shook them violently like crazy. Stand up. It is as heavy as an aircraft carrier, and there is nothing you can do after it is caught. Every time it shakes, it will reduce a certain amount of blood. Following these 2 giant squids, the 2 half-healthy giant squids from behind also arrived quickly. They ran towards the remaining 2 aircraft carriers angrily and entangled them without hesitation. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 338. Boom 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 boom. Boom boom. Coincidentally, 4 giant squids were the first to arrive at the naval battlefield, and there happened to be only 4 Allied aircraft carriers left, so they were attacked one by one. The 4 giant squids, like 4 fierce shrews, grabbed the 4 aircraft carriers and kept shaking them. Every time they shook, the aircraft carriers would hit the sea hard, causing huge waves. This is the rhythm that really shakes you to death. Wang Ling was stunned, but when he came back to his senses, he scratched his head in embarrassment, looking a little distressed. It is true that these giant squids came quickly to help out of good intentions, but in this situation, their good intentions turned out to be bad and put Wang Ling in a difficult situation. Originally, if these giant squids did not come, Wang Ling could command 10 V-3 rocket cars and 4 rounds of bombing to sink all these aircraft carriers. The total time required would not be very long. However, the giant squid suddenly entered and divided the 4 aircraft carriers equally, disrupting the rhythm. With the extremely high armor and health of aircraft carriers, it would take a long time for the giant squid to sink them. During this period, Wang Ling also took action against rats. He can now use V-3 rockets to easily sink these aircraft carriers, but he will definitely accidentally damage the giant squid. Wang Ling is not an indecisive person. If a tank under his command is penetrated by a terrorist robot and there is no time to drive into the maintenance factory, he will definitely kill the tank and the terrorist robot together before the tank is destroyed to protect the large army. But the situation is different now. These giant squids are not enemies, but friendly forces from the number 4 coalition base. They came to help with good intentions, but in the end they killed 4 giant squids. This seems unreasonable. As for the characteristics of troop attacks, every ship entangled by a giant squid still retains its attack power, but cannot move, which naturally greatly limits its combat effectiveness. However, aircraft carriers are an exception. When shaken by squid, they can still reproduce carrier-based fighter jets. This carrier-based fighter jet is not entangled by a giant squid and can still attack all targets within its flight range. No, while Wang Ling was distressed, a new round of carrier-based fighter jets had been produced on the 4 aircraft carriers, and a total of 12 of them were flying. However, they did not dare to directly bomb the giant squids. Instead, they continued to fly towards the dock of Allied Forces Base number 16. Hit it down. Wang Ling had no choice but to take the attack. With a command, the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft crawler vehicles opened fire in unison. 15 carrier-based fighter jets could not break through this kind of air defense attack before, let alone the 12 now. They were all shot down before they even got close to the dock. After this round of carrier-based fighter jets were all wiped out, Wang Ling wrinkled his face and continued to struggle for a while. Then he sighed helplessly and pointed his finger at the battlefield still being fought under the sea. So far in the fierce battle, both sides' deep-sea troops have suffered too many losses, and the remaining numbers are getting smaller and smaller. Wang Ling aimed at the dolphins, commanding each V-3 rocket car to launch rockets individually, and shot down more than 10 rounds in succession. The remaining dolphins were quickly wiped out and helped calm the battlefield under the sea. After the war, the coalition still had more than a dozen submarines left, but these submarines did not sit idle. Instead, they collectively turned their direction and headed towards the 4 aircraft carriers. Seeing this scene, Wang Ling was originally worried that these submarines would open fire regardless of the situation and destroy the aircraft carrier and the giant squid together, but only later did he realize that he was overthinking it. These submarines seemed to have received temporary orders and did not launch an attack. Instead, they dispersed evenly and surrounded the 4 aircraft carriers. It looked like a siege, but in fact they were just watching the show. Boom boom. Boom boom. The giant squid was still shaking hard, staring at the aircraft carrier, refusing to let go at all. Violent banging sounds were heard frequently on the sea. Each sound was caused by the side of the aircraft carrier hitting the sea water. It was a lively scene. Now, these aircraft carriers are suffering as never before. The giant squid wrapped around them kept shaking them gently. During this period, the giant squid seemed to be able to speak, and quietly said gently to these aircraft carriers, "Tear off your head." Around there, more than 10 submarines were watching the show, and there were countless people on the coast, all staring at the electronic video and talking about it with great interest. The majestic aircraft carrier, the most lethal weapon of the Allied forces on the sea, was actually treated like a monkey in the end. Can you not feel aggrieved? However, under the shaking of the giant squid, the HP of these aircraft carriers decreased very slowly, and they could not be killed in a short time. During this period, the 4 aircraft carriers were not to be outdone, and continued to produce carrier-based fighter jets. The next round of 12, a fighter jet quickly took off and flew towards the coalition dock without giving up. Go on, fight it down. And Wang Ling has also gone from being distressed at the beginning to dumbfounding now. Facing these carrier-based fighter jets, he has no idea of mercy. With one order, he, himself, and the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles are firing on all cylinders. All carrier-based fighters were quickly shot down. Wang Ling didn't pay much attention to this round of fighting, but he suddenly discovered that an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle involved in air defense in the Wolf Group had been promoted to the 3-star elite level. Wang Ling was stunned at first by this discovery, but then he slowly grinned and asked quickly in his mind, "Uncle Hey, do these carrier-based fighter jets count as points and experience?" Uncle Hey immediately replied, "Of course, after all, they are also combat-effective enemy troops. However, whether it is the previous anti-submarine aircraft or the current carrier-based fighter jets, they can be continuously reproduced, so the corresponding points and experience will be greatly reduced. Only 1/3 of an intruder fighter, which is 10 points, equivalent to the score of an ordinary soldier." Ouch! When Wang Ling heard this, he immediately became extremely happy. This is an honest and fair way to gain experience. Although the score and experience of a carrier-based fighter jet are not high, these fighters can be continuously reproduced. Looking at the speed of the giant squid, it is impossible to kill the aircraft carrier for a while. During this period, you can easily increase the points and gain experience. Initially distressed, then dumbfounded, now Wang Ling is actually excited. However, after taking a look at the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle beside him, Wang Ling frowned slightly and quickly ordered the tracked vehicle that had been promoted to the elite level to withdraw from the battle. Other tracked vehicles were also transferred out of this area and went to stationed on the coast next to the dock. Although points for fighter planes shot down by Wang Ling's men will be counted on Wang Ling's head, experience does not count. It is relatively difficult to upgrade the level of anti-aircraft infantry. After all, the number of Allied air forces is far less than that of the army. But now, it's rare to gain experience. Of course, he doesn't want to let these tracked vehicles steal it and let them pick up the leaks from behind. Just take as much as they can. Even now, Wang Ling still regrets why he killed an aircraft carrier in advance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 339. The air defense force of the city's defense line is more than enough to face 15 carrier-based fighter jets. With those 3 more, wouldn't it be easier to gain points and gain experience? However, one ship was killed in advance, leaving only 12 carrier-based fighters. Although it did not affect Wang Ling's personal experience gain, the number of anti-aircraft crawlers in the Wolf Group that could be picked up was very small. Hey, what a pity. Thinking of this, Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh. But Uncle He seemed to have guessed what Wang Ling was thinking, and couldn't help but speak sarcastically, "You kid, stop being so greedy. Do you want to get ahead of yourself? You are just trying to gain points and experience. I'm turning a blind eye if I close one eye and don't buckle you. It's already pretty good, but it's a pity for you." Wang Ling had developed his shame a long time ago, and he immediately asked innocently, "But Uncle He, is this what I want to do? Originally, I wanted to kill those aircraft carriers directly, but who let the giant squid suddenly invade? This is the game world you designed, isn't it your responsibility if something like this happens?" He's a good scapegoat. Uncle He rolled his eyes and didn't want to pay attention to him. In fact, this game world is indeed the masterpiece of Uncle He, but he only laid out the general outline and gave all the characters independent character thinking. The specific details have nothing to do with him. They are all virtual games. The characters are controlled, and there is even Wang Ling, a game player, to promote it. Uncle He silenced his voice, and Wang Ling didn't say anything more. He picked up the long barrel and stood ready. Boom boom. Boom boom. The giant squid was still shaking the aircraft carrier like crazy. During the shaking, the aircraft carrier's health volume was also constantly decreasing. Originally, Wang Ling thought that the speed was too slow and the stalemate lasted too long, but now, watching the aircraft carrier's HP shrink, he became worried and hoped that the speed could be slower. However, those giant squids don't care what he thinks, they will do whatever they want. During this process, the aircraft carrier was also constantly reproducing carrier-based fighter jets. While waiting, the next round of carrier-based fighter jets was finally reproduced. All 12 flew out of the aircraft carrier and continued to mechanically fly toward the dock. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Wang Ling saw this opportunity and opened fire as soon as the carrier-based fighter jets flew into his range. He is now a 5-star Special Forces level anti-aircraft infantry. His rate of fire is much faster than that of the 3-star elites, and his power is huge. 3 rounds of anti-aircraft shells will be fired for each bombardment. The overall power is compared to the elite's anti-aircraft tracks. The car is much bigger. After being bombarded by him like this, the 12 carrier-based fighter jets quickly became unable to hold up and were shot down one after another. In just a few breaths, 6 of them crashed. Fortunately, he transferred the other anti-aircraft tracked vehicles of the Wolf Group, otherwise he would only be able to grab 2 or 3 carrier-based fighters in one round, which was far from enough for upgrades. Although it is more powerful than elite anti-aircraft crawlers, there are so many of these crawlers that it is difficult to gain experience. Now it's okay, Wang Ling is at the front, the first to bombard, the first to eat crabs, and he has taken the lion's share. Are you afraid that he is not experienced enough? There were only 12 of these carrier-based fighter jets dispatched in one round, and he killed half of them himself. As for the remaining half, it had already flown into the shooting range of the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. Wang Ling stopped chasing him. He eats meat, so he has to give his subordinates some soup, right? Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, those anti-aircraft crawlers finally opened fire, but within this range, the anti-aircraft guns on the edge of the number 16 coalition base also fired together. The firepower of the 2 was superimposed, and the remaining 6 carrier-based fighter jets were not able to fire at all. No matter how far they flew, they were all shot down without being able to hit even a single missile. When Wang Ling saw this process, he immediately glared at the firing anti-aircraft gun and wanted to dismantle it. There is no experience level for defensive buildings. No matter how many people are shot down, the firepower is constant. This guy builds here to gain experience, which makes him feel like he is occupying a manhole. However, after all, it was a building at base number 16, so Wang Ling couldn't say much. In short, it didn't affect him. For a long time, this scene was repeated frequently. The giant squid continued to shake the aircraft carrier, and the aircraft carrier also continued to produce carrier-based fighter jets. In each round, half of them would be knocked down by Wang Ling, and the remaining half would be killed. Contested by anti-aircraft crawlers and anti-aircraft guns. The whole scene looked like a stalemate, but in fact it was the coalition forces that had the absolute advantage. After observing it for a while, the soldiers on the coast became bored, so they directly changed their targets and continued to focus on defense. But Wang Ling enjoyed it. During this period of time, he gained a lot of experience. However, as time passed, Wang Ling gradually became anxious from being excited at the beginning. The giant squid has been shaking the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier has been losing blood for such a long time, and now it has become a big loss of health. It is estimated that it will sink soon. but Wang Ling has never been able to break through. Upgrading from a 5-star Special Forces soldier to a 7-star ace requires a lot more experience than going from no level to a 5-star elite combined. Damn it, why are you taking so much trouble? Wang Ling gritted his teeth and complained. At this time, the next round of carrier-based fighter jets was finally produced again, mechanized to fly out to die. These 4 aircraft carriers have actually been abandoned by the Allies since the other Allied navies were annihilated and entangled by giant squids. Now these 4 aircraft carriers were just ordered before the mechanized executive commander gave up. It was just the last order, and it was considered a desperate struggle. However, this kind of struggle was advantageous to Wang Ling. Facing this round of carrier-based fighter jets, Wang Ling also launched a mechanized bombardment. Seeing that the aircraft carrier was about to sink, Wang Ling had no hope of upgrading. However, after the 6 carrier-based fighter jets were shot down, Wang Ling was stunned. Because this had been bothering him for a while, he cleared this paragraph. After time and experience, I finally made a smooth breakthrough. Subconsciously, the 5-star symbol above his head flashed rapidly, and soon changed into a 7-star symbol. At the same time, the military experience was once again instilled in his mind, and his body was slightly strengthened again. Of course, what was also strengthened along with it was the cannon barrel on his shoulder. From 5-star to 7-star, from Special Forces to ace level, Wang Ling feels refreshed now. It's worth it that he has taken the trouble to gain experience for so long. It's worth it to upgrade. This process is actually not complicated to say the least, and Wang Ling has long been used to it. There is no discomfort at all, only relaxation. By the time he completed the upgrade, all 6 remaining carrier-based fighter jets had been killed. Not only Wang Ling benefited from the blockade during this period, but his group of tracked vehicles also benefited from it. 2 more elite vehicles were added during this period, and their firepower was greatly increased. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 340. Haha, it's so refreshing. Wang Ling smiled, very heartily. However, he now also wanted to try out the power of the 7-star ace anti-aircraft infantry, but he was not too arrogant, and soon focused his energy on those aircraft carriers. And these aircraft carriers lived up to their expectations. Before they sank, they finally produced the last round of carrier-based fighter jets, and they all flew out. Dong 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 dong. Dong 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 dong. Wang Ling caught them and immediately bombarded them. During the bombardment, even Wang Ling was a little surprised. The gun barrel strengthened after the 7 stars fired at a higher frequency than before, and it could fire 4 anti-aircraft missiles in one breath, which was extremely powerful. According to preliminary estimates, he is now using his own gun barrel for anti-aircraft defense, and its power is definitely comparable to the salvo fire of 3 elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. The strengthening is too obvious. The previous 5-star Special Forces level could only shoot down half of these carrier-based fighter jets, but after the enhancement, before these carrier-based fighter jets could fly into the air defense range of the tracked vehicle, they were all shot down by Wang Ling alone with the gun barrel. After successfully shooting down these carrier-based fighter jets, Wang Ling was a little dazed at first, but then he became excited. This firepower is worth it. When he switched to air defense infantry before, Wang Ling himself was not optimistic about the air defense infantry. At that time, he had no choice but to choose because he had no other options and did not want to waste subsequent experience in killing enemies. But now, Wang Ling is gradually enjoying the benefits. In the Red Alert world, just like in the game, the range is purely land combat and cannot reach the Air Force. Before the switch, Wang Ling himself had no way to deal with the Allied Air Force and could only rely on the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles in his team. However, as his level of anti-aircraft infantry increased, this feeling of helplessness became less and less, and the anti-aircraft infantry also began to show its role. Wang Ling's current military experience is not at full level, only 7-star ace level, but at this level, the firepower is no worse than 3 elite tracked vehicles. He is even confident that he can intercept at least 6 allied invaders alone. If the fighter planes are not attacked, the rocket pilots will be destroyed as many as they can. The 7-star ace is already so powerful, so how powerful will it be after the 10-star soldier king? Thinking of that scene, Wang Ling couldn't help but get excited. As expected, this system is to strengthen oneself. These arms are very useful. Have you finally enlightened? After noticing the change in Wang Ling's mentality, Uncle He suddenly broke in and joked in his mind, how about changing the arms to terrorists? Crazy Ivan would also do it. Otherwise, radiation engineers are quite good. Suitable for you. Wang Ling was still excited at first, but after hearing Uncle He's words, his face suddenly darkened. Uncle He, if you think I'm tough on my life, just say so. Can these arms be converted? They are all international. It is a military unit that everyone wants to fight. It was specially designed in the game to blacken a certain force. If I switch to this thing, am I looking for death? Do the terrorists want me to strap a bomb to my body and die with the Allied soldiers? Ha ha ha. It seemed that it was rare to see Wang Ling frustrated, so Uncle He actually laughed with schadenfreude, so wildly that Wang Ling was so angry that he gritted his teeth. This artificial intelligence brain has human thinking and emotions, which is really annoying. Boom boom. Boom boom. Blah blah blah. While the two of them were talking nonsense, the 4 aircraft carriers were finally drained of their health and slowly sank to the bottom of the sea. Until now, this naval battle has officially ended. As for the results of the war, the coalition forces lost a dock, nearly 20 submarines, more than a dozen giant squids, more than 20 mobilization troops, an anti-aircraft gun, and a magnetic storm coil. The overall loss was not small. However, in war, there will inevitably be sacrifices, and there is nothing we can do about it. Moreover, compared with the losses of the Allied forces, they still took advantage of it. In this naval battle, the losses of the Allied forces were even greater, and all the dispatched navies were wiped out. When the battle came to an end, Wang Ling breathed a sigh of relief. In this battle, aside from the losses suffered by both sides, Wang Ling is quite proud now. He can be said to have benefited the most from this battle. It was a bit difficult for the anti-aircraft infantry to level up, but they had just let the giant squid cooperate with the aircraft carrier, giving him an opportunity to gain experience and use it to break through. Otherwise, if he accumulates experience through normal battles, he doesn't know how long it will take him to level up. After the war, there were some remaining reinforcements at the number 4 coalition base. However, these submarines and giant squids did not rush to return to the base. Instead, they stayed here. At least they would not retreat until the navy on the city defense line was rebuilt. General Li Wiki was not idle either. He quickly commanded the engineering troops and began to rebuild the dock again. Regarding base construction, Wang Ling couldn't get involved. After adapting to the ace-level air defense infantry, he took the anti-aircraft crawlers of the Wolf Group back to the original station and continued to garrison. The gap between the war in the Red Alert world and reality is really big. On a large-scale battlefield in reality, a battle may last for several days and nights, or even 10 days, a half-month or even longer. But in this Red Alert world, this time has been shortened too much. This naval battle took a relatively long time, but from the departure of the Allied Navy to the end of the naval battle, it only took 1 day at best, and it was just dusk now. After stabilizing, Wang Ling hurriedly checked the electronic map and found the 3 Kirov airships at Coalition Base Number 1. It has to be said that although this kind of airship, known as the God of Death in the air, is very powerful, its speed is really painful. The naval battle here has ended, but these 3 Kirov airships are still halfway there. Advancing in a leisurely manner, it is estimated that it will be late at night, or even at dawn, before they can successfully reach the Allied base number 1. During this period, of course, Wang Ling could not keep observing. He stayed until the break time. After arranging the staff on duty, he contacted Uncle Hay and returned to the transfer station of the different dimensional system. Speaking of which, it has been quite a while since the last time the points were counted. During this period, Wang Ling did not lead the team to launch any large-scale attacks, but he also fought defensive battles and blocking battles. In many battles, many Allied troops were wiped out. In the recent naval battle, I heard Uncle Hay talk about points again, and then I curiously asked about the points. During this period, he and the members of the Wolf Group had gained a total of nearly 10,000 points. Together with the remaining points, he now holds a total of 38,214 points. Taking into account the previously used points, the total has exceeded 75,000 points, which is less than 75,000 points short of the system's advanced redemption threshold. 25,000.